And here we go.
Recording in progress.
We want to welcome everybody to our study session. Study sessions are always an opportunity, since no decisions are going to be made, a chance for discussion and dialogue and questions. And sometimes with the hustle and bustle of everything that goes on around us, sometimes it's just great to take a deep breath and just talk. And we're going to talk about one of the most important things that our city does, of course, is to provide services to our residents. But before we begin, I'm going to ask that our compassionate city clerk share how people can participate in this meeting. Clementine?
Yes, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the city is currently holding public meetings by teleconference. There are two ways to virtually participate. You may join the meeting using the Zoom app on your computer or mobile device, and you can also call into the Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom on your computer, smartphone, or telephone, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864 and then enter meeting ID 161-384-4440 £. And if you're prompted to enter a participant ID, press £. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public-meetings. To make a public comment using the Zoom app, you can virtually raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you dialed in by phone, raise your hand by dialing *9 and then unmute yourself when called upon by dialing *6. You must do both. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. We'll call on each public speaker in the order of their hands raised. Please stay within the time limit that will be established for today's meeting, which we will show using a countdown timer on the screen. If you're connected live on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. Today's meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with approximately 10 seconds delay, and on Comcast channel 25 up to 90 seconds delay. And we look forward to receiving your public comment.
Okay, so nicely done as always. And would you do one more task, please, and introduce your caring city council to the public who may be watching?
Certainly. Councilmember Hoffa, I have not seen join us yet. Councilmember Albert should have come.
Here.
Councilmember Hoffa is not joined. Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Councilmember Williamson.
Here.
And Mayor Roberson.
And I am here as well. So we'll call our meeting to order. And once again, Clementine, if you could display on our screen our flag. And as soon as we see that, we will in a moment. All right, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And probably the next great Zoom invention is going to be where multiple speakers can talk all at the same time, like on our cell phones. So anybody want to do a startup with me, we'll become billionaires. All right, so let's go right into our council discussion study session. And that's to receive an update on the city's strategic initiatives and city staff work program. As I was reading that, it was very interesting to me as part of the introduction, and that is, these are items outside, quote unquote, the routine operation of the city. And when we think of the routine operation of the city, I'm simply thinking that even without these work programs, there's a lot on the plate for our amazing composed city staff. We have the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, finance office, public safety with our police chief and fire chief, the city clerk's office, community development, human resources department, parks and recreation, and harbor, Monterey library, and of course, our large NCIP program. We also have relationships with our Presidio, the Defense Language Institute, as well as the Naval Postgraduate School. And as the language capital of the world, there's just a lot on the city's plate, and those are called routine. Well, that's really basic municipal government. So as we go through this, we're going to go ahead and have a brief overview from our staff, take a look at our vision, our mission. We've spent many hours going over our strategic plan, discussing this. And we also recently adopted our value drivers. And we asked our staff, which has so concisely come back, to describe how do these goals, visions, objectives translate into work programs, into delivering the services. So with that, I'll turn it over to our very composed city manager, Hans Uslar, who can make the presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have prepared a presentation for you. The presentation is targeted, so to speak. We are not going into the details of every single staff work program or every plan that we have created over the past 12 months. But what you see today is, as the mayor pointed out, the culmination of a substantial amount of work that we put in from starting from the first workshop when we met and discussed how can we create a systematic that allows everyone to track what we are doing here in the city of Monterey. And today we are presenting it as our first update to the council and to the community. And pending your input today, this will become a routine item that we will bring forward at scheduled intervals that you tell us what your preference is. Is it every 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, something like that? We also hope to get a little bit of better understanding from you, the council, of what we want to do. Next slide, please. Nat put together this pyramid that basically highlights the various components of the work that we are presenting to you today. The systematic started with our vision that the council created during 2 separate workshops, including the mission statement, and then we went over value drivers. And then just recently, early January, we talked about the fine-tuning of the value drivers and the strategic priorities. And tonight we also add to that the staff work program items. And you will see references to this throughout the agenda report and also the presentation. Next slide, please. The vision that the council agreed upon was or is Monterey, a beautiful, special place to live, work, and visit. And that's the overriding vision statement that the council has reaffirmed and has also built for itself. The mission statement is in partnership with our entire community. The Monterey City Council provides visionary leadership, ensuring a safe, healthy, historic, economically vibrant, and sustainable environment. And with those words, you already filled your vision statement with the action items that you want to create through the next slide, please. The value drivers. And so this is a new presentation of the value drivers. Instead of giving you a long list of bullet points, we created this bubble diagram. And I start on the top and going in clockwise, protecting our environment, value driver for fiscal stewardship, value driver to develop and retain a quality workforce, historic preservation and diversity, transparent and inclusive government, active mobility, affordable housing, securing of water resources, and also quality of life. And underneath all those value drivers, now we have created the various programmatic items that staff is working on based on your input and community input, and also legislative mandates that also play a role in our work program. But that's an interesting way, hopefully, to present our value drivers, because they are, though in a staggered form, but they are not really numbered. So the bubble diagram hopefully represents that in a fair way. Now, how do we want to use the systematic that we have jointly worked on? First and foremost, it reminds every single one of us, it reminds the council, what are your agreed upon priorities? And it will help you once in a while when something pops up that might be interesting and it might be attractive, but is this really part of what you feel is part of your agenda, part of your policies? And those value drivers will be helpful for that. More importantly, also, it keeps us, the staff, focused. We know now what is important to you, and we know through that also what is important to the community, because you are representing the community. You are the elected officials, and it keeps us focused to realize, okay, this is what the council wants, and it helps us also to not get distracted, but by other topics that are brought forward, since we have all an agreed upon work program. It helps you also to see how are we doing as your staff. We can update you now, and we can update the community. And again, you can tell us, when do you want those updates? I would expect to do it at least annually and tell you what progress has been made, and also honestly tell you, okay, we haven't made any progress on this item, and here's the reason for that. It also helps all of us to understand that we are balancing what is important and urgent, and balancing what is less important and less urgent. That is always a question, that how important is really this topic, even though 5 to 6 constituents are really concerned about it, but what other higher priorities or important and urgent priorities may really take over right now before we get to the other items. So it will help us to balance that. It will help all of us to balance that, not just staff, but also the community and the council. And of course, when you look into the details of what we have compiled and assembled here as topics, it shows you the wide span of the work that the city is doing, the wide span of all the initiatives the city is doing. Next slide, please. You will see about 2 slides, I believe, about resource allocation. And I want to make the council aware of resource allocation. And also, I know the council knows that, because we have spoken about this a few times, but also the community needs to understand that everything that we are doing will require a legal review, it will require legal analysis, and it will require recommendations. Whether we go forward with a new ordinance, or we want to enter into a new agreement, or we want to create a new tax measure, everything has to go through the city attorney's office. So you are an outside counsel who helps us with the review of, let's say, very difficult lease questions or other contractual questions. So there is one element that everything will go through that office. And the other part of resource allocation is, when you dive into all those topics, you can really see that the majority of the policy issues are really coming through 1 or 2 departments, and a bulk of the work comes out of community development. And council knows that a lot of the work that comes in front of you with respect to affordable housing, for instance, comes through community development, and also the housing office that is within the community development. So a lot of issues, but they are on very few shoulders. And what you see in that list, of course, does not include what we are doing every single day when we work and provide services to the public. It is basically what you see, a work program that is in addition to the routine work that we are conducting day in and day out. And the mayor pointed that out in the beginning and his introduction. Next slide. What council also know, but what I also want to remind everyone, we are operating with very lean staffing levels, even pre-pandemic. And I explained it to council recently in the following way. The staffing we have in the planning office is enough for every planner to cover 90% of the routine work that is being brought forward to the council, to the counter. Again, the staffing in the planning office covers 90% of the routine work, is allocated 90% to routine work. With that, we have 10% extra capacity to work on topics that are brought forward and are outside of the routine work. Every planner has 10% capacity to take on an extra topic. And so we are very lean. Even pre-pandemic, we were very lean. We may have to look at staffing levels in certain offices if we continue to bring forward topics that require attention and also better timeliness. So that's one thing. Staff is, in my opinion, performing at peak levels. There is no, we can do more with less here in the city of Monterey. This staff is performing at peak levels, and we are still a small city of 30,000 residents, and we cover a huge variety of topics. And with that, we need to understand that we need to continue to balance the expectations that are set with our actual fiscal and staffing realities. And so at the end of all of that, the takeaway is it's all about choices. How are we prioritizing? How are we prioritizing the big topics right now in front of council, and the extra items that come and say, well, we want you to do this as well. We want you to do that as well. And council has made in the past very wise decisions and has also listened to staff and has been very supportive. So I want to be clear that we are grateful also for the council of understanding that, but today also it's my job to share that kind of knowledge and that kind of insights also with the community that is hopefully listening to our presentation as well. Next slide. We are back to the bubble diagram, and with that, I'm handing it over to Ned, who will go over those value drivers a little bit more in details, and then we will open it up to you, the council, and the public to provide us with feedback. So the next about 10 minutes or so are dedicated to go over some of those details, and then we hopefully get feedback from you and also from the attending public. And with that, I hand it over to Ned.
Great. Thank you, Hans. So as Hans mentioned, we have a council adopted a total of 9 value drivers, and we'll go through each of the value drivers and talk very briefly about the strategic priorities that fall into each value driver. As you can see from your attachment, there is at least one city staff work plan that's attached to each strategic priority. And some of these strategic priorities that fall under the value drivers have over a dozen different items in the city staff work plan that, as Hans mentioned, spans a variety of departments across the city. So we'll start off with the quality of life value driver. And this value driver states, in collaboration with our community partners, working to improve the quality of life of all of our community members by fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion, championing equitable access to affordable housing, and maintaining a safe environment. And as you can see from the icons presented here on the slide, the topics cover health and wellness, public safety, that includes fire protection and community policing, emergency response and resiliency, funding projects for the NCIP as an example, staying physically and mentally active, responding effectively to neighborhood concerns, and also fostering community connection at the library. So a variety of topics under this quality of life value driver. The next value driver is on protecting our environment, and that's specifically by addressing climate change through ecologically responsible and pragmatic solutions. Some of the examples of the strategic priorities, and then of course the city staff work program items under each of those strategic priorities include protecting the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and environmental assets from pollution, developing a long-term strategy for municipal work to and a sustainable fishing industry, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then also expanding access to the city's electric vehicle infrastructure. The next value driver is focused on fiscal stewardship. And what that means is serving as stewards of the city's financial resources through sound economic vitality efforts, streamlining operations, reasonable revenue enhancements, visionary long-term planning, fiscal transparency, and community partnerships. Some of the strategic priorities listed under this value driver include carefully managing city revenues and expenditures, putting into place appropriate revenue enhancements, restoring and establishing city reserves, seeking grant funding for city services and infrastructure, supporting our military bases and installations, business retention and attraction, prioritizing facility rehabilitation, repair, and replacement, managing and tracking the city's pension liability, and then also driving innovation through technology and business solutions. And as you, again, we encourage members of the public, if they haven't already, to download the staff work plan, because as one example, under technology, there are over a dozen different city staff work program items. The next value driver focuses on developing, retaining a quality workforce. And that's not just developing and retaining, but also recruiting a high quality workforce. It starts with providing city staff with the tools, resources, coaching, and feedback they need to perform well, supporting the workforce through the pandemic, implementing best practices in diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, fostering employee safety and wellness, and then last but not least, providing fair, competitive, and market rate compensation and benefits to employees through effective labor negotiations. We'll continue to the next value driver. This one is on securing water sources. And this specifically is to champion regional and local efforts to secure adequate, affordable, and sustainable water sources for the city now and into the future. And the one strategic priority here is to continue to advocate and lobby on behalf of the City of Monterey's interest on regional water issues, especially as it relates to water for affordable housing. Next up is a new value driver on affordable housing, and specifically to support efforts and policies that provide equitable access to affordable housing in Monterey in the region. And the two strategic initiatives here include affordable housing and also addressing homelessness. The next value driver on active mobility is to expand opportunities for people of all ages and abilities to bike and walk safely through active transportation, accessibility, and safety initiatives. Here, there are 4 strategic priorities. The first is to maintain and repair core street, roadway, and storm drain infrastructure. The second is focused on parking infrastructure. The third on expansion and maintenance of trails. And the last but not least is a priority to develop and enhance mobility for people of all ages and abilities. Okay, we're going on to the next value driver, which is to preserve, promote, and maintain the city's historical and cultural resources through responsible stewardship and historic preservation that highlights the contributions and perspectives of all people who are part of Monterey's diverse history. The 2 strategic initiatives here, first is to ensure that the community's history is interpreted and presented from a social justice lens. And then the second is to protect Monterey's maritime history. And then this is the last value driver, not of course based on importance, but just on the list here, is to foster a local government that's transparent and collaborative and solicits, welcomes, and appreciates input from all. And the 4 strategic initiatives here that are under this value driver. First and foremost is to engage with the public using a variety of tools, that's online, in-person feedback, to create a website and maintain a website that is accessible to everyone in the community, business and members of the public, to review the city's value drivers and priorities on a regular basis, which we're doing now, and then exploring partnerships with community partners in the nonprofit, business, military, government, and business sectors. So that's a summary of each of the 9 value drivers that Council established, as well as the strategic priorities that we've developed that fall underneath that value driver. And again, we encourage folks to check out the attachment for the full list of specific initiatives along with the timeline that goes into that for each of the staff work program items. We're now handed over to Hans, as he'll be asking a number of questions for the City Council and ask for your engagement on our priorities.
Yeah, thank you, Ned. Council, these are just some suggested questions that we bring forward to your attention as part of a potential discussion we may have. What are your priorities? What are your top 5 priorities for 2022? Is there anything we are missing on the list? Is there something you like to add to the list? The next question is there anything you think we should leave alone this year, possibly remove from the list, put it on a topics parking lot? Is there anything that stands out to you? And also, as I asked you twice before, let us know also how often would you like to receive updates about those work plans. And as I indicated, it is the pleasure of the council to ask when you want updates, and we will be happy to make it part of regular council meetings to basically update you also as part of our normal meetings. So this is not a study session item then anymore, or a special meeting anymore. I think that is it, what we have, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I believe Mayor's muted.
Yeah, thank you so much for the concise presentation. There is so much. This could take days and months and years to discuss, which, quite honestly, we have done over the years. What I would do now is, Council, would you like to go to the public, or would you like to just ask some questions, have a discussion? I see a few heads going public. Okay, let's do some public input, then we can get all the input together, then we'll have a deeper conversation. So this is a remote meeting, so we'll go ahead to Clementine. Clementine, do we have some folks who want to share their thoughts on the city's vision, mission, value drivers, and work program?
Hi, yes, I do see a few hands raised. And
Okay.
the first one was Nancy Soulet, so I will turn it over to Nancy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for, this is great that you're coming up with your priorities, and I know we as the citizens appreciate that you're trying to focus in on a number of issues and yet put it into a strategic thing. I was glad to see that you had protecting our environment, public safety, and resiliency as part of the part of your value drivers within it. And to that, I wanted to speak to the need that I have become aware of in these last few years regarding the utilities and the need to underground the utilities in order to protect the resiliency of our community, and not, as so many of the headlines have shown, see that we have dangerous fires caused by downed power lines. I noticed today as I went up Pacific Street to see so many heavily weighted cables that are sagging. I mean, literally sagging. My husband and I even wondered if it would be possible if you had a very tall vehicle, would anything ever even get make it come down? I know it's been an issue in other cities when we've had storms and high winds. I think it's really important that we address it and make it part of your strategic planning. I actually have read recently a study that was done back in 1994, April 8th, 1994, by the city engineer. And it was to the city engineer from your project development construction manager. And it was to address the feasibility of converting overhead utilities to underground. They had several recommendations, but the very two top, before you get into the detailing of it, number one, establish an underground utilities conversion planning committee. And number two, prepare a utilities conversion plan as a master plan and make that part of your city's other inclusiveness. For instance, when we saw so many streets dug up with utilities from the water changes that we've had to do there a couple of years ago, that should have been part of a master plan where we already had what are we doing to underground and make our city safe, environmentally safe. There's many articles about the prediction that we'll have a lot higher winds, and so the danger has persisted. This study from 1994, that's over 25 years, and it seems like it's very long and still a very important thing that I hope that you start developing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. And next, we have a telephone caller with the last three digits 902. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Nina Beatty. I have a number of comments on the different aspects, the different value drivers. I feel like the overall priority of partnership with the entire community, visionary leadership, safe, healthy, sustainable environment, those are not happening now. And the city council has a long way to go before those do happen. Value driver number 3, driving innovation that leverages technology and business solutions. There needs to be inserted into that value driver appropriate and safe technology. If it's not appropriate, if it's not safe, then it's not enhancing the community at all. Under value driver 3, there's also the item on the pension reserve fund, which was a big surprise to me. There's an amount of $103 million. And my question is Monterey in debt? Is this a situation that's a current debt for the city? Also, there's a big section on supporting our military installations. And included in that is the Monterey Bay Military Communities Compatible Use Plan. The city told the public that this was going to be a public process, that there was going to be input from the public, hearings, updates, all kinds of outreach to the community, and that has never happened. And this is, again, a perennial problem with initiatives from the city, is that there's a bait and switch. Something is offered to the public, the council votes on it, and then what happens, what's promised, never takes place. So where is the draft on this plan? This is a very, very important document that's being created, and there's been it's never come before the council since it was adopted. The military installations here undermine world peace, and they cause death and destruction worldwide. They harm the environment, and we saw that firsthand with the Fort Ord Superfund site, as well as the contamination already from military facilities here in Monterey. They corrupt local governments. They undermine and subvert true democracy. They drive up the housing prices here, and they drive out people that make up the critical fabric of our community. They deflate wages, and they subject Monterey to non-consensual toxic exposures, interfering with this community's health, well-being, environment. Military 5G has just been implemented, and it's not, and the council's not addressing it. Finally, I'd like to say the update to the city's ADA transition plan. I have never been contacted about this, and I have the most extensive record of requesting ADA accommodation and being repeatedly denied. No one has notified me that the city was doing this, and I have asked for a transition plan, but the city's refused to involve me as a stakeholder. I have other comments. I'll put them in writing. This is a very, very inadequate plan. It has a lot of holes to it. Affordable housing is
Thank
one of
you.
the issues that needs to be addressed in a.
Thank you, Nina. And we need to go on to the next person, which will be Jean Rash. Jean, please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to join Nancy Soulet in the encouragement for an infrastructure approach and procedure. And I believe we can manage to get you the funding. Many communities, the neighborhoods of Old Town, New Monterey, and Monterey Vista have for 3 to 4 years been planning approaches to undergrounding for the entire city. You could go to our website called Monterey Undergrounding. We've done extensive research, met with experts, and I think we can be a source of information for you and brainstorming on funding. It would meet your vision statements of beautiful. It would keep the mission statements of keeping a safe and healthy, sustainable city, and the drivers of protecting our environment, fiscal stewardship, quality of life, and we can combine it with the technology approach. The more brilliant of the members of our committee, which does not include me, really see this as also overlapping with a small grid approach to energy and battery sustaining of energy to the home, so that we can better keep our workforce going rather than losing our energy with our energy cutouts done by PG&E. And we have these very severe fires. We have the fire risks. We got on this in the beginning because of the intrusion, the threat of intrusion of small cell towers into the neighborhoods. Undergrounding would reduce the attraction of that to our telecoms. We could keep them in more commercial areas. There are so many advantages that integrate together, and this does need to be a driving goal, along with the sea rise, with all the great suggestions coming out of your planning commission. Those are our two most important. They're long-term. They need a lot of vision. They need a lot of planning, and we can do it. Let's get into the 21st century here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
All right, next, let's hear from Esther Malkin.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry, Esther, I made a mistake. Please go ahead.
Oh, am I good now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. So yeah, good afternoon. I just wanted to refer to the value driver that mentions community members by fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion, championing equitable access to affordable housing, and maintaining a safe environment. So I 100% agree with the previous residents' concerns and suggestions, but I want to throw in the difference between what their concerns are and what the majority of the residents in the city that are workers, that are renters, have to worry about. We have record inflation. Every time they have to pay their rent, they have to worry that they're going to have another incident in their lives happen that might not allow them to pay their rent. They have to worry on a regular basis, every time their lease is renewed, if they're going to be able to afford the 10% increase, which is now being added to a bunch of other fees as a way around getting a higher rent increase with AB 1482 maxing it out at 10%, which, by the way, compounds every year. And their salaries don't even go up the first 10%, let alone an additional 10% every year. And once their lease comes up and they can't afford it, finding another place that they can afford is virtually impossible. So it's a very different level of concern to have to worry about the environment and undergrounding when you have to worry about whether you're going to have a roof over your head. So I challenge this equitable mention there because this city council has refused to even do the absolute bare minimum of just even supporting our rental registry to help these residents of the city, which are voters and are the majority of the residents here, to be able to have a quality of life that the rest of you get to enjoy without having to have a constant worry over them on their housing. And that insecurity is very real. It transfers to their children. It transfers to every aspect of life in this city. And I do not believe that we are doing enough to claim that we are doing an equitable justice to this important matter just because we talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, we do not have any further hands raised at this time.
All right, let's bring it back to the council for a discussion. One of the things is the city manager has asked what we see our priorities as. I've got a list, I'm sure everyone else does. So, and we want to welcome Alan Hoff, of course, to our meeting. I didn't notice when you came on, but we're glad you're with us. So anybody want to start off your reflections, questions, etc.? If you don't mind, let me just share with you what I'm hearing. First of all, this is obviously an ongoing discussion. One that's really what government's all about. And I look at our vision: safe, scenic, and solvent. Offline, I'll tell you where that phrase came from. It's not a secret, but we really, I don't like to think that money drives everything, but budget is something that's extraordinarily important. We just got through a 30% cut during the worst of sheltering in place. So when you look at affordable housing, you look at climate warming, you look at sea level rise, you look at infrastructure, so much of it comes back to the budget. So I think keeping Monterey solvent has to be, for me, the #1 priority. Then we think about being scenic. That means a lot of things. To me, it means it's beautiful. Every morning I wake up, I'm so grateful to live in this city. And frankly, I think the world is going crazy around us and keeping us sane. Oh, there's another S word. Safe, scenic, solvent, and sane. Oh, I like that. Maybe it's just me. But this is such a special place. And that's also in our mission, keeping this a special, beautiful place to live, work, and visit. And again, climate warming is the existential challenge to humanity. I'm reading about CO2 and the theory that somehow through technology, we're going to be able to sequester CO2 from the environment. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But once again, it gets back to the budget as we're looking at our 4 affordable housing sites in the city. 2 of them are in the area of the 10-year sea level rise. The Coastal Commission is going to want us to take a good hard look at those sites. You probably saw that memo already. And so these are the kind of decisions that are really quite difficult. Infrastructure, just the maintenance of our infrastructure, undergrounding, something I've supported all along. But take a look at the conference center. We were able to float a bond, and the properties, the hospitality properties are paying that through a fee. But we have a lot of deferred infrastructure, $30 million as a potential master plan for the library, our public safety buildings, our Monterey Sports Center in a need of a lot of infrastructure. And where does that money come from? As I've said all along, I thought the increase in the TOT should be assigned to infrastructure renewal and maintenance. Again, I'm back to budget, aren't I? And then Also, that was mentioned, the unfunded pension liability. That's nothing new. That's something we really do need to tackle. Budget. Staffing. As Hans pointed out, there's a huge demand on our staff. We had to eliminate 100 positions. That was probably the most difficult decision I've ever made in 40 years being on and off the council. So we have to make sure we keep the staffing, because who delivers the product? All of you on our screen and watching know that it's the people out there with their sleeves rolled up who deliver the product. So we have to make sure we continue to have this incredible staff, and that's budget. I look at inflation. Yes, but I've seen inflation. I can remember when inflation was going up 15, 16%. In fact, my lovely wife at that time bought a 5-year CD. Boy, was that ever smart. So these ups and downs, the stock market's ups and downs, but keeping our solvency and our budget is the key to everything else as far as I'm concerned. So that's my chat and my thinking about this. Great work. We'll continue to look at it, revise it. And as a school teacher, I always appreciated it what school board said. We're going to leave it up to the teachers who deliver the product. We have confidence that you'll do it. And likewise, I have a lot of confidence and support for our staff from the city manager down to deliver the products and the service that this city needs. So any other thoughts? I'm sure there's plenty. So that's kind of my overview. Councilmember Allen.
Yeah, I'll be pretty short. I agree with everything that you said, Mr. Mayor, and would just kind of reemphasize the importance of infrastructure and financial, financial security for the city. You can't do anything if you're fiscally insolvent. So we really have to make sure that we take care of that. And I think we know that there are some issues there, and there are also some resources, because we have passed some recent tax measures, and that should generate some revenues to help with some of those things. I would also just mention, though, that the affordable housing issue, the affordability issue in general, for me is certainly a top priority. It has been for 10 years. And I look back over the last 10 years, and I'd say it's something we've made small progress on. We built the Van Buren Street apartments. That was 18 apartments. And we finally completed the Monterey Hotel, was I think another 18. But we need 10 or 20 times that amount. And so that for me is a priority. It seems to be really difficult for all kinds of reasons that I'm not going to go into. But I've just learned that if you don't keep your focus on something as a council member, as a council, and as a city staff, it's really hard to get things done. So I hope we continue to keep that in high focus. I will say, first of all, I think the plan is a good plan. And I think it came together out of collaboration amongst all of us with staff and input from the community. I will still say, if we're looking for things to reduce, to make it easier for staff, I don't believe that the water issue is something that the city is in a position to solve. I said that during our retreat. I continue to say it. It's obviously important, but unless staff are going to bring some initiatives to us that I've not heard anything about, having it there seems more symbolic than it does anything else. And then the last thing I would say, and this is really to speak to the city manager's comments about staff load and responsibilities, which I'm certainly cognizant of and sympathetic to. But I just wonder and would really encourage any employees who may be listening to communicate with your managers, or if you're more comfortable with your union leadership. Are there activities that you have to do that really are not that critical, but yet you have to do them? I know in my job, there are things that sometimes I am expected to do that honestly have very little bearing on student learning and success, yet I'm told I have to do them. And so I'd just like folks to know that this council member would like to help relieve you of things that maybe aren't essential. And I think sometimes in a big organization, we're a big organization, we end up sort of always just doing things the way we've always done them. And sometimes there are things that maybe we've always done that maybe we don't need to do. Or maybe there are regulations that we have that as a council, if we could reduce, and maybe they're not so essential anymore, we could free up staff time for some of these other priorities. So I would be all about kind of rebasing staff responsibilities, that if there are things that in your view maybe could be reduced and some of your time shifted to other priorities. So those would be my comments, and thank you for all of the work in putting this together to the staff who were involved.
And thanks, Councilmember Allen, for mentioning the fact that the voters have approved Measure P and Measure S for our streets, sidewalks, storm drains, and ADA access. And they also voted 2% more for hotel motel tax by an overwhelming amount. So thank you for mentioning that, which again makes sure we have to be responsible for that directive that they gave us, but I appreciate that. Anyone else like to share a thought or two, ask some questions? Councilmember Dan?
I'll bring up a few things.
Sure.
I agree with everything that Alan and Clyde has said. I mean, obviously those are our top priorities, and I think everyone on the council feel that those are our top priorities. I want to mention about value drivers, and after this particular presentation and work study, I think it should be on our plate all the time. And a good way of doing that is by putting those value drivers in our action plans, or not our action plans, but our action items that come to our council. So we know where we are and that we're accomplishing those, because a lot of times we do great presentations on them, but then people forget about those value drivers because they're not in front of you anymore. And I think it would really help if at each action item that we have on the agenda, it directly relates to one of our value drivers. I've seen that done in other organizations, and that just reminds us how important those those value drivers are. I think that's a very important piece to reminding everyone. I want to just make a comment on Alan's comment on water. I do understand about we don't control the water, and we don't control the new water sources. And there's no question about that. However, I think where I was coming from when we were talking about water was, if there is initiatives that are coming forward, and there are, because there will be initiatives coming forward, that we get out in front and support those initiatives for those water programs, whatever it is, just any water on the peninsula. I think that's what I was looking at for a value driver, is our support for new water projects of any kind, whatever they are. Because once again, and I know some people, I like to believe this, that water is connected to affordable housing. It just is. I mean, there's no other way of looking at it. I mean, I know that once that water is here, and then we can start building more affordable housing and more units, we should be ready, and we should be prepared for that. And I think we're taking steps to do that by looking at our own ordinances, our own zoning laws. And once we get prepared and it's there, then we can move. And I think we've done a pretty good job over the last 3 years to do that. So even though I do understand what Councilmember Hoff is saying, and we have no control over the water, obviously, but I would definitely like to see us, if there is something available, that we put our 2 cents in there to make sure that it happens. Let's see, infrastructure is very important. I know just the example of the conference center. We were very fortunate for the hospitality industry to step up and to support that multi-million-dollar renovation, but it'll only happen once. And if we don't keep maintaining our facilities, people are not going to vote for a measure to make sure our streets are in good shape, make sure our parks are in good shape. So we have to take care of them as we go along, because I just don't think in the future people will be willing to help us if they don't see us maintaining them. So I think that's a top priority, or at least one of our top priorities, is to make sure that our buildings and our facilities are maintained, and that they're not moved into deferred maintenance. I think that's a very important part. So that's all the part of the infrastructure. And then of course, finance. I've always believed that as the years go on, we have to make sure, and as revenue starts to come in, that we place those fundings in areas that are very important to us. And I brought this up when we started making reductions, is that we did reduce programs, and those programs were very important to our residents. And as those fundings come back, I don't want to lose sight of how important those programs are. And sometimes the new funds that come back will be refocused into other areas, and those funds or those programs will be lost, like a conference center, or sports center, or our recreation department, or our libraries. As those funds come in, we really need to make sure that those programs are put back in place. And that includes employees too that run those programs. I still think that's very important. So thank you very much for the plan, staff. I think it's a good plan so far. I just want to make sure that we stick to it, and it just doesn't end up on the shelf. So most important thing is making sure that we understand where those value drivers are, and that we are doing on a monthly basis. That's it, Mayor. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember Dan. Your idea of when we're looking at agenda action items of having a value driver included, we'll ask our city manager. It sounds to me like that would be not that difficult to do. Could just be one line, but a great reminder. City manager, what do you think?
Yeah, we've done this in the past when we had previously council approved value drivers, and you see it occasionally, but we will follow through on that suggestion and re-implement that, because it is very important to show the framework in which something gets forwarded. So great suggestion, and we will do that.
And then Councilmember Dan's comment too about the sports center made me think that the Parks and Recreation Commission recommended, and the council did adopt, a surcharge for our recreation and parks use. And that surcharge is going to a specified, specific, restricted fund, which is renewal and maintenance. And so thanks for the reminder on that, Councilmember Dan. And I think that's something we absolutely have to do citywide for all our infrastructure. Councilmember Tyler, what are you thinking? What would you like to share?
Yeah, so I just would start off by giving some appreciation to staff. I think the report looks good. It's long, but there's a lot in there, and I think it helps to see everything in one document. So if anybody hasn't had a chance to look through it, I'd encourage it. And again, thanks to staff. I think with the color coding too, I think it helps kind of see the different levels of what we're looking at here. So I have a couple of pieces of feedback. One of the things that was brought up a couple of times that's new from the last version of this is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm wondering if there is a way for us to better include that with our efforts in the engagement with the public. So I think it says it in there with one of the drivers, but when we're narrowing it down to some of the strategic priorities, how are we doing that? So, we're saying it, but I hate for us to make this claim that we're going to prioritize that, and we're not really identifying a way that we're going to be doing that. And I think that there is a way that we can better plan and work with the community on developing ways for public engagement with a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. So I'll throw that out. It's, I think, maybe tied more so with number 9. For number 6 with the housing, I think that there's also space for us to think more about this follow-up to the September study session when we had a conversation about protections for the renter community. There was this discussion, and it's also identified in regards to a potential rental registry and getting additional data. But I think that there's a deep desire in the community for us to pay better attention and find ways that we can create protections for the 64% of our residents that are affected by poor renter experiences. I hear on a regular basis from renters being evicted from their house, particularly in relation to recent policies that have been passed. So how can we give a little bit more attention to that and help create that level of prioritization there? It also said this in the driver. I think that there's a lot of things that are in the drivers that don't necessarily translate into the actions that go into the work plan. And so it just gives me a little bit of concern that we're not fully expressing or identifying ways that we're going to achieve these drivers. It just kind of seems a little bit to be ambiguous. And so I think it goes into the housing one a little bit. And actually, let me just navigate to that real quick so I can better define what I'm saying. So, okay, it's the strategic priorities. The first bullet under value driver number 6, it says support affordable housing through modern zoning policies, ordinances, ADU policies, housing grants. So it's really that first part. When we're talking about modern zoning policies and ordinances, there's no kind of sub bullet there that really identifies how we're going to do that. And what's great about that is that all those sub bullets there identify kind of a time frame of when we expect to do that. But it's like we're just saying, let's modernize, but how does that translate into kind of how we're trying to prioritize that into the work? So I think that there could be a way that we could talk through that more. And by the way, the things that I'm saying, I'm not necessarily putting onto the staff. I really think that we need to have the leadership on the council to help work with the staff on this. So I'll speak to about that more in a second, but let me just try to finish running through my list. One of the things that could be identified there as an example is we're going to be entering the 6th cycle of our housing elements. So I think that's an important thing for staff to be able to highlight. That's going to take some staff capacity, and we have to do that. So I think it's a really good thing to highlight there as an example of the work plan. And then there's some other pieces with housing that we can talk to, but I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible. I'll jump to number 7 and just say, as a bicyclist myself, and I know that the mayor bikes around town, I know that Alan bikes around town. I know that there's a need for us to, and I talk to a lot of bikers in the community, for us to focus on how do we make the city of Monterey more walkable, bikeable. Well, part of that's tied to housing, and I think we'll experience that through our ability to be able to develop in a greater capacity someday. But in the meantime, I think there's people that live and work here that do want to bike that maybe don't, because of the unsafe nature of biking in this town. There are some, and somebody might need to help me. There's the arrows on the road that have a bike, and it basically says this is a shared road and bike path. So there's one of those on Pacific Street. I was riding my bike the other day, and that's fading. So, I mean, something as simple as kind of, updating the paint jobs for those would be very helpful, but also finding ways of creating more protected bike lanes in the city. And it has alluded to that with the project that's going to be going through Fort Ord. But I think that creating more prioritization around walkable, bikeable community is key. I wanted to touch on a little bit of feeding off of what Nancy Soulet was sharing earlier. This conversation came up when we were passing Measure S around trying to include language in there around a dig once policy. I think we would be smart to think of a way of putting that, implementing that type of policy into our city. It doesn't make sense for us to dig up a road and start working on it and not think about the direction that the city's likely going to be moving into the future. Is it going to be cost prohibitive perhaps for certain things? Yes, I think that's obvious, but I think when we're thinking about the future long-term sustainability of the city of Monterey, I think it would be prudent of us to think of a dig once policy. And maybe there's some things that we can do along with that that might help make that a more valuable policy for us to move forward on. But I just throw that out. And then I have two more main things that I'll share. One is about there were some comments about the military installations. And I don't think that our military organization is maybe the best in every area, but I do think that first of all, it's important for us to give appreciation to the people that are serving our country. So thank you for all those that have and continue to serve. But also, you know, my day job, I work at the Naval Postgraduate School, as many of you know, and I respect the mission of what we do at the Naval Postgraduate School amongst, in comparison to some maybe other activities that happen within the military, within DoD, because we are educating the warfighters. And what better way can we prepare and make our military organization a better body than to educate the people that we're having to go out there and make these decisions. So I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a positive tone towards the benefit of those military installations being here and the value that they provide, not just to our community here locally, but nationally and globally. And then the last piece I'll end on is one of the questions that you asked, Hans, was in regards to frequency. And I don't know how, I'm not saying that I know for sure what this should be. I think at least twice a year would be appropriate. I think maybe doing a check-in at least halfway through the year. But I will say that when we had the first strategic discussion when I came onto council, there was this idea that we would take a retreat, we would have like a retreat or some kind of strategic discussion every quarter. So we would take one of these study sessions and have that discussion, and hasn't fully materialized. And so I'm not sure if that's necessarily the most effective way for us to move forward, but I definitely think doing it more than once a year is appropriate. I think Nancy might have also said this as well, but a lot of vision, a lot of planning, that's absolutely what is needed in this city. I think we can't get comfortable with the way that we used to do things. And I think that the council needs to take more leadership and responsibility in thinking strategically and visionary about the direction that the future of the city is going in, because this world is becoming more complex and there's a lot more unknowns. And if we're not being more intentional about how we're working with the community and other stakeholders on some of these big issues, we're going to keep getting frustration from residents and likely lead into some things that are going to end up costing us instead of us investing into our future. So that's it for me. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Tyler. I appreciate your insights and thoughts. And Councilmember Ed, we'll let you wrap this up before we adjourn to a special meeting.
You bet. Well, I wanted to go last because it makes it easier for me to just say, I can't argue with much of what I just heard from my fellow council members. I want to address some of the questions that were on the list. It was our homework assignment, and I want to be a good student and help the city manager out. He asked top priorities, and I want to dive into that because I'll be able to reveal some of my thinking about why those are top and how they connect. And I'm going to try and keep it brief. Mine are community partners, Because if you can't get along with people, you can never get to agreement, and you can't move north with the operations of what we're tasked to do. So actively think that that's number one. Number two, you can't do anything for a community, and a council can't do anything unless we have a sound fiscal footing. And as you know, we've all experienced this, as our community has experienced it in the last 2 years, was a $32 million deficit from the loss of TOT. So that highlights the importance of having a sound fiscal attitude and all of the implements that takes, because, you know, we don't get to print money. That happens in the federal government. We have a state requirement that we must, as a requirement, enter into a balanced budget each year, and we can't live in the red. We have some highlights to look at. Look forward to seeing how we are going to face that in some of our fiscal process in years to come. But we have to be sound fiscally, otherwise we are not doing our job. Number three was develop and retain a quality workforce. If you don't have a quality workforce and retain it, you're not able to have the work done that we declare as a community and as a council is important. So that is high on the list for me. Number four is the comment of secure water as the value driver in the priority of secure water sources. And I find that, yes, it was limited in the things that we could put on there, but it's wholly connected to item 6, which is housing. And I am encouraged by the fact that we do have opportunities, but I'm discouraged so many times when the answer comes back that we can't get a water meter. We just went through the RENA process with AMBAG, which I serve on that board. And it's frustrating for us to have to go through a process when I know at the back of my mind, getting the projects through with those valuable projects, valuable land, it goes nowhere unless we can get water permits issued. And so it puts us in a position to declare that it is a priority, that we do want to have continuing dialogue with important partners in Sacramento, like the Housing and Community Development, which is the agency that our RENA numbers get reported to. So it puts us in a position to maybe do some deep thinking and process what opportunities may come up. We're not declaring with this statement that we're launching into an initiative that the city of Monterey will carry alone. I recognize with the top priority for me, which was community partners, that there's a connectedness between the need for the water resources, and also we do that with our partners in the region. So those are connected as well. But the water for me is connected to number 6 in housing. So if I can have a 4 is a declared priority, and a 6A, it's housing as well. But my 5th is the historic preservation and diversity in this community. With a community that just celebrated 252 years, I guess we're coming up on 252 years. We should never lose sight of where we've been and where we're going, and history is part of that, but the future is absolutely connected to that as well. So that's my number 5, and I have a subset with housing is there too. I want to go back to a comment that was on the military. Thank you, Tyler, for pointing out the importance of that. And it's not just what we do in our partnership with our multiple partners in the military and the federal government and the services we provide, but as you know, and I've said this before, and many of you have the same family lineage, that my father was in the Army, my older brother was in the Army, my younger brother was in the Army, and my son was in the Army. And I have a daughter-in-law that's in the Navy currently. So, you know, the military means something for everyone. But for me, what it means is that we have neighbor partners who work and live here, and they're very important to us. So I treasure the fact that they are in our community and they have providing safety to our United States, number one as their mission. There's no number two mission for them. Their mission is to be prepared to defend us and to keep us safe. Very honorable. And thank you, Tyler, for mentioning that. I also want to say that the process of going through this, I view this as the value drivers are a statement of priority or a belief system. I see the strategic priorities below that as something that grows, that we add to, that staff looks for opportunities. Those are opportunities that are akin to a living document. So the strategic lists that are there, I think, are the opportunities that will grow. And that's what I would expect that the staff is able to bring back to us with the priorities of our values. I think the strategic elements in this roadmap is the opportunities as we go forward to hear from the staff. I think it should be often, and in my mind, the process is there's an annual process, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're only meeting one time a year, whether it's quarterly or whether it's twice a year. But every year, the outcome is we have said this value driver, if it's 9, if it's 8, it changes or it stands pat, but the council comes together with a process to say, this is the instructions to the city manager and his team that is important for us. And that to me is an annual process. And I think that it's tied to the budget process. I think that ahead of the budget, this should be relevant to us and ever present. Also, I think that an opportunity is for us to visually place the bubble maps. And I like the fact that there is not one that's 1 and not one that's 9, but we have a nice pin cushion board in the council chambers. And I think we ought to maximize that and utilize that and have some visual references for the community to see and for us to see when we're back together in the council chambers. The mayor mentioned some of the previous initiatives that we all participated in the last several years, the TOT, Measure S, Measure P, also the sales tax. And the highlight for me is the Measure X, which was passed in the county. And that Measure X is tied back to the priority of being able to protect our community and improve our road and our transportation system. And there's a big part of that, which is the mobility that Tyler talked about, and that's FORTAG. And so I didn't want to not mention FORTAG and its importance to the community that I wholly support in my role as the past chair at TAMSI. So all of those put together, I think, indicates to this community that all of the council members have supported these things. It's an old town, but it is young at heart. And it's a town that's on the move. And it is a special place and a beautiful place. And I'm proud to be part of it, proud to be part of this council. And as far as this work product, I see this as a helpful roadmap that is not yet complete. And it gets complete because we participate as we see opportunities coming forward. And so if anybody is seeing this as something's missing and there's a bullet point that's not there, the strategic priority doesn't look like it's quite complete enough, I would say, don't worry. That's what we'll continue this year in allowing staff to bring back to us to add strategic priorities with opportunities as they come up. I know we're short on time. That's all I wanted to say, but good comments by everybody. Good work product. Thank you, staff. I know you had to add a lot of this, refine this, and try and interpret 5 people giving lots of different directions about which way to go and north, south, east, and west. And somehow or another, you figured it out. And I think this is a good document. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Council Member Ed. I think we'll wrap it up. We are going to go to a special session because there's something that's very timely. But I really I agree with Ed. I really enjoy working with my colleagues and the public and the staff. As you know, I love to quote Voltaire, where and the easiest translation is don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And there is so much good going on in this city, and sometimes we tend to focus on what isn't being done, but it's always valuable to think about what is being done. And I think so much of it goes back to the city staff that provides the product and the service. And so again, getting back to the vision, Monterey, a beautiful, special place to live, work, and visit. I certainly think that's something that we all strive for. So with that, Hans, do we need to go to a different link in order to adjourn? Okay,
No, no, Mr. Mayor, we stay on this link right now, and our sustainability coordinator, Ted Terrasas, is eager to share with you a 30-minute presentation about the item.
Hey, is that one of our value driver shorter meetings? Was that in there?
The more you talk, the less productive you are.
I like how Hans didn't,
all right.
he didn't smile at all or laugh when you said that, Mayor. Like he was very serious.
Mr. Mayor and Council, yesterday morning, I think
Hans, please excuse me, before you start, I want to adjourn our study session and call to order our special meeting agenda. And we're going to ask once again, Clementine I think we should, if you think that we should, Clementine, should we tell folks how to participate in this, or since it's
Sure, I'll do it quickly.
Yes,
due to the COVID pandemic, the city is currently holding public meetings by teleconference, and there are 2 ways to virtually participate. You can join our meeting using the Zoom app on your computer or mobile device, and you can also call into the Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom on your computer, smartphone, or telephone, use the link or phone number that is on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864 and enter meeting ID 161-384-4440, pound. And if prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on Zoom are at monterey.org/public-meetings. To make a public comment, you can virtually raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom app, or by phone by dialing *9, and then unmute yourself when called upon by dialing *6. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak, and we'll call on the public speakers in the order of their hand raised. We appreciate it if you stay within the time limit. And today's meeting is also streamed live on our YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey and on Comcast Channel 25. Both of those have a bit of a delay, and we look forward to receiving public comment.
Good, thank you so much. So we'll call our meeting to order, and the only item is to amend a resolution to authorize the city to apply for the Cal Recycle SB 1383 Local Assistant Grant Program, either individually or jointly with other agencies. And this is time critical. So back to our composed city manager. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. SB 1383 is a brand new law. There are brand new grant applications, and there came yesterday morning brand new grant guidance to us that kind of changed the rules of applications for a grant. And with that, I punted over to Ted, who will explain to you briefly what's going on. It's a matter of timeliness right now, and Ted, of course, has just 3 slides for you, and he will jump directly to a second slide. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Hans. Yeah, so just very quickly, as Hans mentioned, I just wanted to bring up really quickly this resolution that was approved by council last week. And unfortunately, when we did bring this resolution forward, the whole region actually here on the peninsula was planning to have the Monterey Regional Waste Management District apply on all the city's behalf for this grant. And unfortunately, because of some complications, for example, you can see there, Cal Recycle determined that the county, who is a district and a Salinas Valley recycles member over in the Salinas Valley, would need to apply separately from either of these joint powers authorities. And since the county is a Monterey Regional Waste Management District member, the Cal Recycle found that the district could not apply on all member agencies' behalf. So because the county basically was out, that meant that we couldn't do it as a group through the JPAs anymore because it was no longer representing every member agency, which seemed kind of strange. And we've been in discussions with Cal Recycle in the past, but unfortunately, this was a pretty recent finding. It was a surprise to basically both halves, if you will, of all of Monterey County, and interrupted two joint application processes. So basically what we're trying to do here, the application is due next Tuesday. So the corrective action, if you will, there is basically getting each city to apply individually and work with the district basically to shift gears and become more of a consultant for application and administration of the grant rather than applying directly on our behalf. So it's going to break it into a lot more grant administration and make it more complicated, and may make it more challenging for us all to work together by next Tuesday. They do give us another month through March to approve a resolution supporting this, but the bad thing is making this change and getting all the member agencies make the change by next Tuesday's application deadline is a challenge. So what we're asking for here, though, is for our new resolution to give us that flexibility to participate in either applying individually or in another manner by next Tuesday, instead of having the district apply on our behalf.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you, Ted. Council questions before we go to the public? Okay, seeing none, let's get some public input if there is any. Clementine, please.
Mr. Mayor, I do not see any hands raised. We have 4 members of the public with us still, and their hands are down.
All right, thank you. Then we'll close that section of the meeting, and I'll just go ahead and plunge in and make a motion to amend the resolution as recommended.
Second.
Discussion?
I think that was a vote.
Pretty close.
Yeah. Roll
We
call,
always
please.
change our mind in the vote.
That's true.
So I heard a lot of voices for the second. Who wants to be the official second?
All of them.
I will.
Alan,
All right.
Whose turn is it?
All right, I'm going to count Ed because he had his hand up. So Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Williamson,
Yes.
Councilmember Albert,
yes.
Councilmember Hoffa,
Yes.
and Mayor Roberson.
And yes, for me too. And so I think that's the only item of business. So as we adjourn, once again, thank you to the public, our incredible staff, our caring city council for another really invigorating educational meeting. You all have a great evening and weekend coming up. Good night.
Go 49ers.
Hey,